Right, adding on our seam allowances onto our pieces, as well as truing up any little spots that might just not be the smoothest of lines. So I've taken the midriff section here and already taped it onto another piece of paper a little bit larger. Now my center front, according to my sketch, would be on the fold. So if you recall from pattern making class prior to this, is that something placed on the fold does not get seam allowance on the outside of it, and the grain line is drawn with the arrows bent and touching the edge that goes on the fold. Now then, I'm truing up my edges here. So my bottom kind of had a little dip right there. So truing it up would be kind of aligning my ruler such that if I came across there, I'd straighten up that line, getting rid of that little tip right there. I don't need to cut it away, but I will now be using this new straightened line for the line that I will adjust my seam allowance off of. And in this case, I'm giving it a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember, we're in full size. Now, on the side piece of our contour pattern, we also shave a little bit off here. And if you recall that on the side seams of the one you made there, and I grade that out. So I will use this inner line as my stitching line. I didn't cut that away yet because I wanted you to see it, but I don't, I could save myself the step of that. It's this line in here that I'm going to make my stitching line. So from that one referenced is going to be my seam allowance outside of that, 1/2 inch. And now coming up over this top edge here. Okay, coming around. I didn't really need to true anything up on this part. It seemed all right. There we go, finishing out any of my markings mid-drift. I need to cut one on fold. What size did you use? If you're using your sloper, it was a size 8. We will come back and add some notches on here after we figure out our notches for the top part. Okay, now the guidelines that we cover or closed up where our new neckline and armholes crossed over. I've taped that down, but they're still a little staggered. It's probably a little hard to see here in the video, but they're a little staggered. I need to true that up. And I'm going to kind of really play it by ear or eyeball in the sense, do I want to trim away one whole edge of that, just blending off of one line into the other? Or would I find maybe the middle of the space that overlaps and kind of blend it from here to here? On my armhole, I am going to go ahead and go to one side of it and blending that away. That'll be what I will use. This one down here didn't have too much of a difference, so it'll be fine. Now then, the center front neck though, I will probably shave a little bit off of that one and come outside of where that one sits to blend this part. So this will be my new line that I'm following when I put my seam allowance on. Okay, hopefully you can see that in the video. And going with a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. Now, on the shoulder, when we got tiny straps, do you ever have problems of straps falling off your shoulders? Well, the pattern maker probably did not do an adjustment for the guidelines up there. It does dip in or come in a little bit tighter, and on either side where I cut it off, that's the measurement I actually want to use. Straighten that off, and from there is where I strike my seam allowance. It just shortens it a little bit so that that strap sits nice and tight over your shoulder and won't be slipping off. All right, just for my ease of drawing, flipping my pattern upside down and using my ruler as I rotate. Use a smaller one getting around this curve. Around here, still maintaining 1/2 inch from my new armhole edge. And remember, on the lower part, we use this inside guideline here so that it sits nice and snug under the armhole. And that's what I strike my 1/2 inch off of. Okay. Down here, I want my dart not sewn as a dart, so I do not need a dart point. I will not notch the legs of the dart. I actually want it to be a dart equivalent of gathers in this space. And when doing gathers, you usually come outside of that anywhere from half an inch to an inch wide. I'm just going to look at a quick guideline here. Or even 1.5 inches. It can go, you can kind of gauge it as you want. So tell you what, we'll just go 1 inch on either side of this. So 1 inch, and over here 1 inch. So that's where I'll use my notchers. Once I have trimmed this out on the line, I can get my notcher in there, notch those. I want those notches to equal back into this space on either side of here. So what, I went about 1 inch on either side, so there and there. So that is when I gather this up. If you remember gathers from sewing class, bunch that down, match my notches here, everything else should match at side seam and center front in order to make that design. Now in the book, the design also, get the book over here, these were nice. The designer gave you a back view to know what are you doing with the back on these. I'm not going to go into that right now. The front had quite a bit there on applying use of your guideline contour pattern. So anytime you cross those guidelines, you're slashing to close the guideline and letting that excess spread out further and further in your dart space. Now then, this design, design 1, is the one that is your third assignment this week, and it does have instructions to be able to do the front and the back and this sheared waistband as well. All right, if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me, and I'd be happy to either meet you online or talk to you over the phone, whatever is working best for you to keep you working on all this and getting it. Good luck.